What's up guys, this is Nikki. As you should be able to tell from the title of the video, I'm going to be ranking the Heir 5 international crews from weakest to strongest in this video. But before we get to the actual ranking list, I'm gonna talk about the rules of the crew battle real quick. First of all, while every crew battle is 5 versus 5, each crew can have a roster of up to 10 players. The first players are gonna be a blind pick, so each crew has to choose simultaneously who their first player is gonna be, and after that you can always decide on player counter picks who you want to send in next. I also think there isn't going to be any stage bans, at least that was the case last year. So if you have like a Marth against Spacey, then the Spacey will not be able to ban FD, for example, which is a pretty big deal in many matchups. And yeah, also every player is probably going to be character locked, which isn't that big of a deal in Europe, since most of us only play one character at a high level. But for a few certain players it might be relevant. Okay, so now let's get right into the list. Starting off the list in the D tier at the bottom is Team Switzerland. This crew is really missing Jariden. Jariden is, I think, by far the best player in Switzerland, and he is not attending Heir 5. He might still be in NorCal, I think, where he has been spending some time farming locals, getting wins on NorCal PR players. But yeah, he's not attending Heir 5, which makes the Swiss crew quite weak. I think just looking at it, there's gonna be a lot of players who know their way around European Melee, who will not recognize any of those players. I personally only really recognize Nero, since I gave him a coaching session since he voted for me in the contract. But yeah, I think this crew is decent. Obviously, I don't want to personally insult any of these players, but I think they don't quite hold up to the crews that are ranked above them, at least on my list. In second place, also in the D tier, I mean second to last place, we've got Team Belgium, which has Ferdit and Razor Ramon among other players. I think those two are the most notable. At least those are the ones that I recognized from those players. Ferdit is a pretty good fox. He's been attending a lot of the French tournaments as well, where I think he's won a set against Mahi, at least one set, I think. But he's also gotten destroyed by Mahi even more times. So it's a pretty promising crew. I think some of their lower level players who are gonna round out the crew might be able to make a name for themselves by beating some of the other lower level players. But overall, I still think that having them in 15th place is accurate. Then rounding out the D tier, 14th place overall is the Danish crew, which only consists of 5 players. Mo, King Funk, Midjeet, Part-Time Noob and Zephyr. Only having 5 players is a little bit unfortunate, but it's also really cool that they were able to have enough players to even create a crew. So they're not gonna have the luxury of being able to choose what player to send in, since they're always gonna have to use these 5. But Mo and King Funk are really good. Mo isn't just like a hype DK, he's also just a really good melee player overall. So he will be capable of taking games, or maybe even sets of really good players at Heir 5. If you haven't seen Mo's set against Zoler from Valhalla, then definitely check that out. I think it was a phone recording which was uploaded to YouTube, but it's a really hype set, so look at that if you haven't already. And King Funk is obviously really good as well. Not just an amazing commentator, but also a sick Falco. But I don't think it's quite enough for them to move up one whole tier. Since in the C- tier, there's only one crew, and that crew is the Scottish crew, which consists of Time Muffin, PhD, Fade, Shifting Shadows, Sox, Glykit, TTS, Pat Cheesy, Johnny Turbo, Graham and Jude. While the Danish crew is missing some of their top players like Eagle, Tomber and Stelzik, the Scottish crew is only really missing Hen, I think, at least from looking at their PRs. Hen seems to be the most relevant player that's missing. Hen would be a great addition to this crew, and might be able to easily put them into the C tier, but since he's not there, a lot relies on Time Muffin, and the question of how much he's going to be able to do. I think Time Muffin has been pretty inactive in the last year. I know that he's been trying to get back into it in the last months, but it's not easy to tell how much derusting he's been able to do, and if he's back to how good he was 1 year ago. If he's just as good, also compared to the other European players, if he is just as good as he was last year, then this crew should probably be in the C tier, but since Time Muffin is kind of a question mark for me, I just left them in a crew for them, in a tier for themselves, I mean. But I do think they can beat some of the crews in C tier, and I think they are favored heavily against the crews in the D tier. Now we're getting into the C tier, which actually has 4 crews, which is the largest tier I've got on this list. I think many of the crews are really close in skill. I think Scotland could also be in this tier of crews, but I wasn't quite sure, and I went with what people in my Twitch chat told me. So yeah, on the bottom of the C tier we've got the Finnish crew, which is missing Levinji, who just did amazingly well at EVO, and they're missing Peki, but they still have a pretty good core of players. I think their 5 most notable players, who they're going to use most of the time, are Mayhem, Paju, Nami, Salovitz and Tinker, which is a really good core, I feel like. They don't just have like 1 or 2 good players, I think they have they've got 5 good players, which is like having 4 good players and then just bad players is a bit unfortunate, since you always like your 5th player could always just get washed. But I think this crew actually has 5 really solid players, so they don't have to be afraid of one of their players just getting 4-stocked. But I do think that the crews above them are slightly better. Mayhem is a really versatile player, I feel like. He can be used in many different matchups, since he can also play many characters. He would obviously have to choose his characters before the crew battle starts, but that's still a nice advantage to have. And Paju, the Peach player who you will see on most of the netplay tournaments on the Scandinavian Discord servers, I think he's a threat as well. Yeah, I feel like this crew is really solid. Some people told me to put them higher, but talking about it with some other players made me decide to put them here. And let's move on to the other crews in this tier so we can compare them to the Finnish crew. Next up, in 11th place, we've got the Welsh crew, which is team take chase and then have your other players not get destroyed. I think Sechi and Istar are an amazing core. I think Istar is really good against Spaceys especially, which is what Sechi told me. And Sechi overall is really good at any matchup from what I can tell. I think if Sechi and Istar can do what they're able to do, then the rest of the players are not going to have much to clean up. Obviously it's going to be different against the better crews, since if there's a crew that has 2 players that are as good as Sechi and Istar, but then 3 other players who are on similar skill levels, then it's going to be hard for the Welsh crew. But I think, yeah, Wales against Finland is a tough one to call, especially since I can't really tell how good the likes of Libbers and Matt Smith and Damon are. But from what Sechi told me, they're pretty good. I've only ever seen Libbers or read about him on Twitter when some people were talking about him, since he seems to be quite active in the UK melee community. But yeah, I think this crew is quite decent, but they're not quite as good as the crew that's above them, which is the Irish crew. They're similar to the Welsh crew in that they have 2 really good players with Mint and Maxi, but then most UK players told me that the rest of the crew is slightly better than the rest of the Welsh crew. So Mint Maxi against Sechi and Istar could be quite even. I still think Mint and Maxi are probably a little bit better, depending on how well Mint can do against Sechi. But yeah, I think I rated both crews with a score of 4, so I think they're pretty equal in skill, and I think they're going to be able to beat similar crews. But overall, I think the Irish crew is a little bit more scary, but we're gonna have to see. It's a really tough call, and I'll be more than glad if Sechi proves me wrong and just take chases every other crew to death. Okay, the last crew in the C tier is the Spanish crew, also known as the Trifa Nova crew. I'm not sure if they're maybe a little bit too high, since Over hasn't been doing too well recently. He lost to both Lovingi and Frenzy at EVO and SmashCon respectively, which aren't bad losses, since he's always been losing to players like that, but usually not 2 weeks in a row. And yeah, I think it all depends on if a crew is able to take out Trif. Trif is able to destroy like some of the almost top level players, like Obviously, if you have a player who's just as good as Trif, then you don't have to worry too much, since you can trade stocks with Trif, then one of your second best players can maybe clean up over, maybe you need one more player for that, but after that there isn't really much to clean up afterwards if you've gotten rid of Trifa Nova. They're missing some really core players, like Mortis, K12, Liax, Daisuke, which makes this crew a lot easier to play against. And I'm not sure how seriously Trifa Nova are gonna take it. But in the end, I feel like this crew is still a little bit more scary to play against than the Irish and Welsh crews. But I could also see them losing to, for example, the Irish and Welsh crew if they have to play against one another. But yeah, overall, I think Trifa Nova would still be able to carry this crew pretty far, but not far enough to make it into the B tier. Okay, the B tier. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. And starting off the B tier in 8th place, I've got the French crew. I think this crew is really strong, but overall I think most of their good players have just slightly fallen off compared to other top EU players. I think them not having Mackenzie is pretty big, since Mackenzie is known as like one of the spacey slayers. I think if you ask any spacey in Europe who likes to play netplay, then he's gonna have a story in which he complains about Mackenzie destroying him. But yeah, overall I think this crew looks very scary. I think Baxon, Maye and Tech is a really strong core. I think after that they just slightly fall off. I think Chalon and Jagov aren't good enough to just put them higher than they are right now. But I could see them beating the crew that is placed above them, or maybe even making it further. And the crew that I have just above the French crew in 7th place is the Austrian crew. And I'm afraid that most Austrian players are gonna hate me now and are gonna flame me on Twitter, because they're very vocal about thinking that their crew is gonna win the tournament, that they're gonna just win the International Cruise event, since they did well at Heir 3 it was, I think, 2 years ago. I think they made it to Grand Finals in the cruise bracket, which is amazing. But I also think that some of their players have just slightly fallen off compared to other European top talent. But I still think that they have got, I think, 6 really good players in Timmy, Pazzi, Glory, Clemens, Ramon and Baron Brody, which is already a really good core to choose from. They've got good character diversity, they've got good matchups, like good matchup spreads. They're missing Ares, the Peach that beat Nun at Heir 3, I think it was, which is unfortunate, but they're still pretty good. But I'm not too confident in their skill as to put them a spot higher than this. Austria versus France was a discussion that I had a lot in my streams, and I really wasn't sure who to give the edge to. But overall, I decided to give it to Austria, but as I said, it could go either way. I think both of these crews are really good, and both of them could be able to cause some major upsets in this tournament. Okay, rounding out the B tier, we've got the Netherlands. The Dutch crew is different to the 2 crews below them in the B tier. They've got Amsa and Nebi, which is crazy. That's such a strong, like, those are the 2 strongest players arguably you have on the list. Maybe excluding Trifa Nova, but maybe not even excluding those. I think Amsa and Nebi might be better than Trifa Nova in a format like this. But I think the players they have afterwards are a lot better than the players the Spanish crew has after Trifa Nova. They've got Atlas, Jamorrison and Crollo, and then they also can decide to, for example, put in Fountainelle if they have to play against Ices, for example. But yeah, Atlas is a Marth player who's pretty good. Jamorrison and Crollo both play Fox, and they both play what I feel like is a pretty aggressive Fox, which can't catch people off guard. I think if any crew has to play against the Dutch crew, it's going to be about how are you going to take care of Amsa and Nebi without losing too many players. Because I think a lot of crews are going to have to use at least 3 players to get rid of those 2, if not more. And then I don't think that the rest of the Dutch players are bad at all. I think they're all really good. So even if you get past Amsa and Nebi, you still have a lot to beat before you can call yourself the winner of a crew battle. They're missing the old Dutch top players, Sigero, Adam and Yapi. I think all of them are pretty much inactive at the moment. I'm not sure if they've been attending any locals, at least not from what I've seen. So yeah, if they had those 3 players as well, and if those 3 players were still in their prime, this crew would be amazing. But since those players aren't there, they're gonna have to settle for 6th place on my list and settle for the B tier. Okay, next up in the A tier, you can actually see that both of these crews are in 4th place, because I just couldn't decide on which crew to put higher. And those 2 crews are the Norwegian crew and the English crew. The English crew is pretty stacked. They've got Prof and VA, which is an amazing core as well. Like, just those 2 players are going to give a lot of problems to many crews. But then they have amazing players to round it out as well. They have Fuzziness, who is kind of a wild card, similar to Time Muffin, since it's not clear how good he is right now. I know that he's been playing Melee on his stream, and he's been playing a lot of Adventure Mode as well. I'm not sure how much that helps, but it's fun to watch, so has to account for something. The English crew also has one of the best ICs in this crew battle, Unhaven, which is always worth a lot. If you can send it in against a player who isn't good against ICs, then he can take 4 stocks without losing too many of his own pretty easily. Yeah, I think the English crew is really strong. Frenzy is on a tear lately as well. And then the Norwegian crew is pretty interesting, I think. They don't have that like good of a roster overall, but their 5 best players are all amazing. And that is what really counts. If you have 5 players that are just godlike at the game, and then 5 players who are awful, it doesn't really matter too much as long as you can use your top 5 players well. And their 5-player core of Priscent, Severa, Zork, Whittle, and Woffe is really good. Priscent, a Fox player, is, I think, you can call me a fanboy, but I think he's easily one of the best Foxes in Europe after, you know, Leffen Ice, Prof, those guys. I think Priscent could just be like the next best Fox. Might be forgetting someone, but I'm not sure right now. But yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing at so many matchups, and he's so good in the Fox Ditto. And Sverre, from what I've been told, is also really good against Peach. So if Norway has to play against England, I think I could honestly go either way. Zork versus Frenzy is a good discussion, I think. It's hard to tell who of the 2 is better right now. We're gonna have to see at Heir. I think it's a good tournament to just directly compare players, especially if they're gonna play against each other in crews. But yeah, I think this Norwegian crew is not to be underestimated. Priscent can destroy some of the really good players as well. Like, he's not just going to get beaten really hard by Prof or VA. I think he's going to be able to go even with them, or on a good day he's going to be able to maybe even beat Prof, which is wild, I know, but obviously Prof is heavily favored when playing against Priscent, but I think in a crew battle format where it's 4 stocks against 4, I think Priscent could pull it off and just beat Prof, and then the Norwegian crew should be able, or could be able, to beat England. But yeah, as that is a hard call to make, I just decided to put both crews in 4th place and then move on from there. I do think that the crews above them are still slightly better, but not by that much though. So now we can start talking about the S tiers. In 3rd place we've got the Swedish crew, which, just to make clear right from the start, is Sweden without Armada or Leffen, and also without Johnnyfied, who I'm going to miss a lot. But yeah, it sucks that he isn't there. But they do have Android, 80, Zolar, Humpe, Fao, and Pipsqueak, which is a really strong core. Fao is probably the best ICs at this crew battle. Either him or Unhaven, it's hard to decide between these 2 who's better, but I think results and ranking wise right now it is Fao. I think the Swedish crew is a lot about using their spacies wisely. They have 6 really good players to choose from, and then especially Poopmeister and Randomness are also very solid options to choose from if they ever feel like using one of them. Poopmeister has gotten a lot better, and Randomness has been playing a lot, I think. He wants to get back to his old prime. But yeah, if this crew can use especially Humpe well, then they can go really far, because Humpe is, in my opinion, capable of beating a lot of really good players if he feels like it. So if they get a good matchup for Humpe, and then all the other players are good enough to not get destroyed easily, they can beat anyone, those players who are left in the crew. So I think they are easily one of the favorites to win the event. Just below them, Sweden's at a rating of 8.5, and above them with a rating of 9 is the German crew, which is the crew I'm on. We've got Ice, Kellner, Nikki, Six, Prince, and Karon. I think almost all of our players could be used in some situation, especially Uzleon, who we used for Dady last year at Heir 4, and Uzleon did really well against Dady, so having him, especially against floaties, is always really helpful. But yeah, the fact that we have Ice this year helps a lot. Last year we made it to winners finals, beating the Swedish crew without gods when we didn't even have Ice, and this year we do have Ice, but we are missing Reaper and Doimling. But I still think this crew is at least as strong, if not slightly stronger, than the crew we had last year. This crew depends a lot on if Ice can beat certain players, because if Ice can get rid of some certain players for us and then maybe take 1 or 2 more stocks, then the rest of us should be able to clean up most crews. We also have good character variety. We've got 2 Foxes, we've got 2 very good Peaches, we've got a Link, which always works in any matchup for some reason. And then we have Prince, who is one of the best active puff players in Europe right now. Like no shots to Tech or Maxi and the likes of them, but Prince has done really well at the last few tournaments he's attended. So I do see him beating some of the other good players on other crews. But overall, the crew in first place, that is in my opinion still the most likely to win, is, who would have thought, the US crew, which doesn't have as many top players as I thought they would have. Like, for example, Lucky isn't attending the event, and Captain Smuckers isn't going, and Swedish Elite isn't coming as well. But they do still have SJ, Westballs, Zoo, Reno, R2D, Lou, Chillin, Toph, Mikey, and Focus. I think I wasn't sure how active Chillin has been. I know that he's been commentating a lot and that he has been sandbagging with his Samus a lot, but I do still think his Fox should be able to beat most European players if he's feeling good. But I think his Fox can also lose to a lot of European players, so I don't think it's as clear-cut as you might think. If any crew can get past SJ and Westballs and still have their own good players left, then it is definitely possible to beat the US crew. But yeah, comparing the US crew to, for example, the German crew kind of needs Ice to beat one of SJ or Westballs, because if SJ just has 1 stock left, then he can pretty easily take 2 or 3 stocks from one of our next best players, which would be really sad. But yeah, if any crew can get past SJ or Westballs pretty easily, and then get to the likes of Zoo, Reno, R2D, Chilla, and Toph, then it is possible to beat them, since I think those players like Zoo, Reno, R2D, Chilla, and Toph are not necessarily that much better than the good EU players that are like in the EU top 40, top 30, top 20 or something like that. So yeah, this is my final list. I'm really looking forward to the event. The atmosphere is always amazing. I'm also looking forward to all the possible trash talking that this list might create. If you disagree with anything, let me know. If you agree, also let me know. If you like the video, let me know as well. Always appreciate it. But yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you appreciate the video, and see you all at Heir, hopefully.